Ready to go?
Yes. Let's do it.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Have fun, everybody!
This past weekend, Audrey and I drove a few hours east to British Columbia's interior to run our first race of the season, the Wild Horse Traverse 50K. We had a really great time and we both shot some footage, so I'll show you more of that in this, the third episode of my 2023 training diaries. I'm also going to bring you up to speed on basically everything that I've been up to in terms of training so far this season, and how I'll be approaching my training for what will be a busy and quite varied season of racing and adventures, along with a new type of run fuel that I'll be experimenting with in the coming months. And lastly, I'll tell you about a new trip that we'll be hosting next summer that will be launching very soon, so stick around for that as well. So throughout the winter, I did a bit of backcountry skiing as usual, but not quite as much this year, because I wanted to maintain a base level of run volume in lead up to our adventure in Patagonia here in March. As you know, Audrey and I had planned to fast pack the O Circuit in Torres del Paine National Park, which would be close to a 100-mile week with quite a bit of elevation change. So I kept an average of around 70 kilometers running 3 to 5 times per week, along with 1 or 2 strength training sessions working with my personal trainer. I wasn't following a structured training plan. I was more or less just going by feel. But Audrey was following a program that she had designed by her coach, Kat Drew. And so I would occasionally join her for her weekly workouts, things like hill repeats and speed work.
Let's go, guys. Come on.
We then left for Patagonia the second week of March, where we spent the rest of that month. And of course, you can see highlights of that entire trip in the first episode of the series in case you missed it. Now, when I got back, I continued to maintain run volume in early April, including a couple of intensity sessions in preparation for the big run that I had planned in the Grand Canyon the third week of April. And as you saw in the last episode, we ended up running a little shorter than we'd planned, closer to 50 kilometers instead of the 50-mile rim to rim to rim because of trail closures. But it was still a big day, and I felt like my training had prepared me really well for it, aside from the obvious lack of heat training.
We're doing 6 by 2 minutes uphill. 3 minutes slow jog down. Ready?
Yep.
Let's go.
Now, when I got back from that, I really only had a couple of weeks before this weekend's race. So while I did do one more solid hill workout, I was pretty much just tapering in preparation for that. We headed out to Penticton on Friday to check into our hotel the day before the race. And the race itself was starting further up the lake in Kelowna and would traverse along the lake back to a town called Naramata, where there are quite a few vineyards, but not so many choices for accommodations. So we had to get up at 3:15 in the morning so that we could drop off our car at the finish line and then catch the shuttle all the way back around the lake to Kelowna to get to the start line in advance of the 7 a.m. start.
Beautiful morning so far for sure, but it's gonna get hot. Thanks for being out here, guys. Appreciate it.
Just a few kilometers in and starts with a couple of punchy climbs. Wow.
There's a creek back there. I was able to dunk my hat, fill up my bottle. It's starting to get really warm. So now is the time where heat management becomes really important.
Whew. It is hot now. Proper hot.
Thanks, guys. Through the aid station there, I put ice under my hat and I put a bunch of ice down my back. And it's all downhill to the finish.
That was a fast few kilometers there. 8K left. And my legs are hurting. Whew.
That first race was more of a B race for both of us, meaning that we did race it hard, but it wasn't a focus for the season, and I didn't train specifically for it. Audrey and I were both instead using it as more of a tune-up race as we begin to build volume heading towards our respective goals for this year. But we both had a really great time, and we're happy with our results given where our fitness was at. I finished in 15th place overall, and Audrey finished 15th place female. It was a pretty competitive field, especially on the women's side. And a special shout out to my Solomon teammate, Janelle Hazlitt, who came 3rd place woman with a really impressive performance, having recently come back from injury. So thanks to all the wonderful volunteers and to the team at Pace that made this such a great weekend. The swag bag was probably the best we've gotten as well, including local coffee beans and cider, as well as this t-shirt that I'm wearing. So I'd highly recommend checking out the entire Pace Trail Run series if you're looking for a fun race in BC's warm and dry interior. So I've now begun to follow a formal training plan, working again this season with Coach Eric Carter of Ridgeline Athletics. And this will be the 3rd season that I've had Eric design my program after having worked with him first on my training for Tour des Géants back in 2018, and again last year in lead up to UTMB. And my challenge last year was that most of my training in preparation for my stage race in the country of Georgia in June needed to be very runnable. I then had a very short period to try to get some climbing in my legs before UTMB just 2 months later. This time it's the inverse, where I'll be training mostly in the mountains, starting first with a month in the English Lake District in lead up to attempting the Bob Graham Round, before then doing some fast packing on the Tour de Mont Blanc and in Slovenia in lead up to racing the Pyrenees Stage Run in September, which all involves a lot of hiking. I'll then have just a month to prepare for the Moab 240, which is not only quite runnable, but is also a very hot race. So the hope is that all of this slower multi-day stuff that I'll be doing throughout the summer will serve to build my aerobic base. Those last few weeks before Moab will be more about heat training, a lot of which I'll likely actually do on the bike while down in Utah preparing for the race. What should be interesting though will be some of the training that I'll be doing for the Bob Graham Round throughout June, including a couple of short fell races that I'll be doing to build both fitness and durability. So stay tuned for that in an upcoming episode of the series as well. And this year I'll be working with a couple of nutrition brands. NAC is a brand that you've heard me talk about before, who supported me for UTMB last summer. And you may also have heard that they've been named the official sponsor of UTMB, which is huge for a Canadian-based company. And they've generously agreed to support my work again this year, sponsoring me for all of my big projects. I really like the guys at NAC and what they're building, and it makes me super happy to be able to promote a Canadian company and to have their support. And you can use my coupon code for 15% off on the website, and they do ship internationally. Now, the last thing I want to tell you is about our new trip that we're planning to Iceland the first week of August 2024 with Trovotrip. If the trip that we hosted to Patagonia looked like fun, then you're going to love this one as well. We'll be spending 7 days camping and hiking as we take in some of Iceland's most beautiful waterfalls and vistas. Now, Iceland is a very expensive country, so tenting will help us to keep the costs down while allowing us to spend much more time out in nature rather than having to drive back to town to stay in a hotel each night. The reason we're launching this one so far in advance is because those campsites get booked up really early. We'll be using them essentially as base camps, so this is not a through hike. We'll be fully equipped and you won't need to carry any extra gear. But it's going to be a participatory camping trip, meaning that everyone will need to help in setting up camp and cooking some of the meals. And we'll be doing a few full days of hiking, so while you definitely don't need to be a runner, you will need at least a moderate level of fitness. So sign up for my newsletter to be the first to be notified when this trip goes live next week, and we do expect this one to sell out pretty quickly. This weekend, we're off to Los Angeles for the wedding of two good friends of ours. Audrey has actually never been to California, so we're going to spend a couple of days exploring the city and doing a bit of trail running on the outskirts of LA. I'm excited to see what the trails are like down there, and I'll be bringing you some footage of that, along with an overview of some of the gear and the shoes and things that I've been experimenting with these past few months. So stay tuned for all of that.